Yeah, damn it. That'll take forever to dry out. So, as mentioned, there was no direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movie released in 2002, most likely so as to not compete with the theatrical and later home video release of the first live-action Scooby movie. Legend of the Vampire was pushed back for release until 2003, coming out the same year as Monster of Mexico. But those weren't the only Scooby projects in the pipeline. To capitalize on the inevitable resurgence of interest in Scooby in 2002, Warner Bros. Animation began production on the first new TV series since A Pup Named Scooby-Doo ended in 1991. What's New Scooby-Doo premiered on Kids WB on September 14th, 2002, and since no one not directly involved with the production can say which project was started first, going by release date, the show stands as the official return of Casey Kasem to the role of Shaggy and Frank Welker's official adoption of the role of Scooby-Doo. Also, as mentioned, Heather North Kenny and Nicole Jaffe returned to the roles of Daphne and Velma, respectively, for The Legend of the Vampire and Monster of Mexico. However, for What's New Scooby-Doo, Grey Delisle Griffin returned to the role of Daphne, and the role of Velma was filled by actress Mindy Cohn, best known for her role as Natalie on the hit 80s sitcom The Facts of Life.
Why is it not good?
Because things aren't the way Blair thinks they are. In fact, when she finds out how things really are, she'll want to hang herself from her family tree.
Oh, quick note, you may notice that Grey Delisle Griffin's last name keeps changing throughout these movies in the credits. Sometimes it's Grey Delisle, sometimes Grey Griffin. I'm not going to speculate on what that means, because frankly, it's nobody's business but hers. But her Twitter feed currently lists her name as Grey Delisle Griffin, so that's what I'm going to go by from here on out. What's New Scooby-Doo basically took the standard Scooby format and updated it for the new millennium, with the gang sporting updated looks and tech more adequately reflecting the early 2000s era. The show was a hit, running for 3 seasons between 2002 and 2006. The third season didn't premiere until almost a full year after the last episode of Season 2 had aired. What's New also marks the rise of what I've come to term Idiot Fred. One of the main problems with Fred Jones as a character to this point was that he was pretty much just your standard handsome leader type. To this point, Fred's main contribution to the gang was the traps used in each episode to catch the monster. He also did his fair share of detective work and deduction as well. Broadly speaking, it was usually Fred and Velma who handled the big reveals at the end of each episode. But that wouldn't exactly fly in 2002. Fred needed a more interesting character trait. Now, I have absolutely nothing to confirm this, but my suspicion is that the production team on What's New somehow were given access to the dailies of the live-action Scooby-Doo movie, and specifically Freddie Prinze Jr.'s performance. If you want to call it that.
You've got to be kidding. No one is stupid enough to believe that.
Who's the ugly old brother?
This is where I suspect Idiot Fred got his start. Whatever the actual reason, What's New heralded the arrival of a Fred where he was more prone to the kind of slapstick usually reserved for Scooby and Shaggy, and a serious case of terminal cluelessness. These elements of Fred have stuck around to varying degrees in all future Scooby productions. I'll give more examples of what I mean as we go on. In fact, let's resurrect a favorite gag of mine. Naturally, being a giant media conglomerate, Warner's attitude toward the direct-to-DVD movies was to keep making them, as they were a proven moneymaker, but why bother doing anything new with the animation? As such, the next 7 films, released from 2004 to 2009, are basically extended episodes of What's New Scooby-Doo. The first of which is Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster. Released in June of 2004, the movie was directed once again by Scott Geralds with Joe Sykta, with a screenplay written by Sykta, Mark Turose, Ed Charlak, and George Doty IV. Yeah, this bodes well. The film opens on a boat out on Loch Ness, where a banner informs us that the Highland Games are either in progress or scheduled to begin soon, and while all the participants are all having a good time, a young woman looks pensively out over the water. This is Shannon Blake, and yes, she's related to Daphne. Specifically, she's Daphne's cousin, but not only that, the castle we see in the distance is Blake Castle, the ancestral home of the Blake family. The Highland Games are being held on the castle grounds, but we'll get to all that in a minute.
Aye then, what do you say we start the games early? Biggest splash wins.
Oh, you're on.
Get used to Angus and Colin, they're going to be doing this kind of crap throughout the entire movie. Shannon tells the boys to get back in the boat, but they just taunt her some more.
If we didn't know any better, Shannon Blake, I'd be thinking you believed in the Loch Ness Monster.
And no sooner are the words out of Angus's mouth than the titular monster decides to make an appearance. It attacks the boat, ultimately causing it to crash against the rocks on the beach. And then the obligatory creepy old guy who knows way too much about local legends shows up.
It's got a death curse.
Oop, sorry, wrong clip. But it's basically the same thing. We then go to the gang, where they get the usual exposition dump out of the way, and I continue to prove my case about who the skeptic is around here.
Legend of the Loch? Get real. It's just another big fake. Right, Velma?
I'm not so sure about that.
Okay, to be absolutely clear, Velma doesn't necessarily believe in the monster, but she does acknowledge the possibility of it being real. The van stops briefly due to the fog, and Scooby has an encounter with what may be the monster. The gang spots whatever it is in the loch, and Velma asks to get closer. Fred, however, isn't paying attention and drives off the road entirely. Lucky for them, they crash to a halt near the castle grounds. After rescuing the van and some obligatory cultural information, the gang spots the wrecked boat and meet up with Shannon, but before Shannon can explain what happened, they're interrupted by Del Chillman, an enthusiastic, bordering on obsessive believer in the monster.
Don't you see? It's because of the games. All the activity has disturbed the creature.
Of course, most people write Del off as a kook, especially Angus and Colin's dad, Mr. Haggart. Del's convinced that the games have attracted the monster, and as he drives off, he leaves Shannon with an ominous warning.
Told you those games were a mistake, Shannon. Now the monster's after you.
The gang finally get to the castle, and we learn a little history about the clan Blake.
Ours is a rich history of falling through trapdoors, finding dangerous secret passageways, and getting caught in overly complicated booby traps of our own design.
This is a callback to an element of Daphne's character that was more or less phased out over time. Originally, in Scooby-Doo Where Are You?, Daphne had a tendency to be a kind of a klutz, which usually screwed things up for herself or the rest of the gang, earning her the nickname Danger-Prone Daphne. This element of Daphne's character was pretty much abandoned after the first season of Scooby-Doo Where Are You?, but it's nice to have a reference to it so many years later. Shannon talks about how recently the castle has been menaced by the monster and how she's even had her own encounter with it, which segues nicely into the introduction of our next major character.
'Twas the great beast of the loch.
Professor Fiona Pembroke, Scotland's most accomplished Loch Ness expert and author of the book Legend of the Loch.
Again, please note, Velma is more than willing to believe in the possibility that the monster exists. She seems even more convinced when, at dinner, Pembroke shares what seems to be new photos of the monster. And speaking of dinner, since this movie's set in Scotland, here's the obligatory haggis joke.
Oh, it's just a boiled sheep stomach, stuffed with diced liver and kidneys.
One crash is quickly followed by another as a caber smashes through the window, admitting Sir Ian Loxley, the field judge for the games and director of the Scottish Natural History Museum.
And author of the book Monster My Foot.
As it turns out, Pembroke used to be Loxley's research assistant, but because she insisted that the Loch Ness Monster is real, he fired her. There is, of course, some mild disagreement between them.
I can't have one of my staff spending all their time chasing after imaginary monsters.
She's not imaginary, Ian. We've been through this before.
Later that night, Scooby and Shaggy head in search of a midnight snack, and in keeping with tradition, are the first members of the gang to encounter the monster, which starts the first chase of the movie. During the course of the chase, the monster knocks a tower off the castle, taking Shaggy and Scooby with it down to the games field, where things get more or less completely wrecked. As the chase comes to an end, the monster vanishes just as the rest of the gang show up to see what's going on. They also find some footprints the monster left behind, which makes Pembroke very happy. Sir Ian, on the other hand, is not.
For the last time, there is no such thing as the Loch Ness Monster!
Sir Ian leaves, but not before delivering Shannon an ultimatum to have the games field fixed by opening day, or he'll make sure Blake Castle never hosts any sort of major event again. Velma notices the footprints lead into town rather than back to the lake.
Why would a sea monster walk along the road?
The next day, the gang drive into the nearby town of...
Gesundheit.
where Shannon is hoping to get help in restoring the games field. While driving in, they think they spot the monster, but it turns out to be a balloon that Angus and Colin are trying to tie down, at least until Colin lets go, causing Angus to get dragged away. Their dad is, naturally, questioning his parental skills.
I asked for jokes and you sent me jokesters instead.
Haggard admits when asked that he doesn't believe in the monster, but he's all for exploiting other people's belief if it brings in the tourist trade. Shannon shows him photos of the destroyed games field and points out that said trade is going to dry up if the field isn't fixed by tomorrow. Dell manages to get a hold of the photos and rushes over to the castle, not heeding Shannon's pleas to stay away. Aren't there any cops in this town? Pretty sure that would be trespassing. Anyway, Dell reiterates his insistence that the games are what's upsetting the monster, and he heads off to stop the Haggards from fixing everything. And then the creepy old guy from before shows up.
This place is cursed. Cursed.
No, not that one. This one.
This is our dockmaster, Duncan McGubbin. Maybe you could point out Professor Pembroke's boat.
She said we could take it out on the lake.
That's Loch.
Oh, out at the end of the dake?
That's Dock.
This Scottish stuff can be complicated.
The gang apparently got permission from Pembroke to use her boat off camera, and on board, Fred finds a hatchway that appears to be locked from the other side and is unopenable. Due to a lack of life jackets, the gang, of course, split up to search for clues. Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Shannon head out on the boat, while Shaggy and Scooby take the mystery machine. However, on their drive back to the castle, somebody changes one of the road signs, leading them into a darker and creepier part of the woods. Back on the boat, the girls find that most of Pembroke's equipment is massively out of date, which is odd, because even though her finances are limited, it doesn't look like the professor has invested any of her money into anything that would help prove Nessie's existence. Proof comes quickly, however, when the radar picks something up and they see something on the surface of the water coming toward them. Fred improvises a plan and they manage to snag Nessie with a fishing net, except Nessie starts dragging the boat in her wake. The engine blows and the rope connected to the net breaks off from the boat. Nessie makes a U-turn and heads back, but rather than attack the boat, she vanishes. Back in the woods, Shaggy and Scooby keep driving, unknowingly over more footprints. They run into Nessie again, and this starts the second chase of the movie. Conveniently enough, the boys land on the boat and the gang heads back to where they saw the monster and make a discovery.
Look, these monster tracks turn into tire tracks.
They sure aren't from the mystery machine.
The gang return the boat to Blake Castle, apologize for the damage to Pembroke, and learn that the games field has been restored. However, Angus and Colin are nowhere to be found. Suddenly, Sir Ian arrives in the SS Overcompensation with the intent of keeping an eye out on the lock to make sure nothing happens to the games field. Sir Ian and Pembroke get into it again, with Sir Ian declaring that he's not allowing any other boat but his in the vicinity of the castle. With Pembroke's boat out of commission, the gang head back out on the loch with Sir Ian to continue their investigation. Of course, the SS Overcompensation has much better equipment.
Hey, what happened to my game?
Fred, I think you were playing the digital compass.
Well, I still got high score.
The new equipment picks up something swimming in the loch, but it suddenly vanishes. Velma theorizes there may be an underwater cave in the area. Scooby and Shaggy try to duck out, but as luck would have it, don't even think about making the obvious pun here. They decide to hide in Sir Ian's mini-sub, which the rest of the gang take to look for the cave.
All it needs is a styling green paint job, and it'll be da bomb diggity.
The gang soon find the entrance to the cave and come out in a vast cavern, where they also find the remains of some Scottish warriors. However, Velma also finds a more anachronistic artifact.
It's a screwdriver, but what's it doing down here?
Maybe they were handy ancient people.
But before they can ponder this for too long, Nessie shows up, forcing the gang to retreat to the sub. Another chase begins, albeit underwater. The gang try to get a photo, but they wind up losing the camera, and the sub suffers other damage. Nessie rams the sub, sending it airborne, but the gang are saved by Sir Ian and they return to Blake Castle, where they discover Del sleeping in the Mystery Machine.
Somebody ripped off my van, man!
With this new information and the game starting the next day, the gang decide to solve the mystery that night. They try contacting Pembroke but get no answer. And then things take a turn for the worse. Cue chase number 4. This chase ends with the Mystery Machine more or less destroyed, and Nessie comes charging out of the woods. Or does she?
Del's van!
The treads on Del's tires match the ones they found in the woods, but as Daphne points out, it couldn't have been the van that had been chasing them underwater earlier in the day, which leads only to one logical conclusion.
More than one monster.
With the revelation there's at least one human being involved in this mystery, Velma hatches a plan to finally figure out what's going on. So, back at Blake Castle, Velma coordinates, Shannon and Daphne watch the sonar on Sir Ian's boat, Shaggy and Scooby act as bait, of course, and as for Del and Fred...
This is Baby Bird, and we do have copy. We are go! Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Baby Bird over and...
The fog rolls in, but that doesn't matter to the sonar, which picks up Nessie heading for the cove. But there's another problem.
McIntyre, what's going on? What? No, you can't do this! This is mutiny!
Fred and Del set up a makeshift net blocking off Nessie's exit from the cove, while Shaggy and Scooby find themselves literally on top of the monster. Unfortunately, McIntyre's mutiny brings the boat into the cove, ruining the net and the plan. Nessie pursues Shaggy and Scooby, while Fred and Del get dragged along by Sir Ian's boat. Topside, Nessie's in range of the harpoon, but Daphne and Shannon manage to get free, knocking the harpoon gun askew and causing it to fire directly into the side of the castle. The boat runs aground, sending the mutinous crew and Sir Ian over the side. Daphne uses the mechanical arm for the mini-sub to rescue them, but Nessie shows up and attacks. But of course... Oh, and that's not all. Remember, more than one monster.
This place is infested with monsters!
Shaggy and Scooby fall into the pit the gang set up as one of their traps, but Daphne thinks fast and basically beats one monster over the head with another monster, which is where everything starts to unravel.
Colin and Angus Haggard?
And as for the other monster, well, I think you've probably figured this one out already.
Professor Fiona Pembroke?
The hatch Fred couldn't open was actually a passage through the boat to the mechanical Nessie underneath. Pembroke would go out, sneak inside, and terrorize the lock while having her own alibi established. And the reason?
She was using fake monsters to get you to believe in a real one.
We don't even care about the games. We just like a good practical joke. That monster thing's the greatest joke we ever pulled.
Anyway, the games go on as planned and the Mystery Machine is restored, but Sir Ian grabs the gang and shows them what he thinks are photos of another fake monster. But the signal for the photos is coming from the abandoned camera from the mini-sub. Apparently Pembroke wasn't arrested for anything she did, because she's right there. And the sonar picks up another signal at a depth that any homemade submarine couldn't possibly survive at. Which gives Pembroke a chance to show her photos to Sir Ian.
Very well. Grab your bags, both of you. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. Chop, chop! We don't want to lose her again.
You know, something still feels like it's missing from all of this.
And none of this would have been possible without you meddling kids.
There we go. So, the gang pack up to head home, and Velma comes to a conclusion about the real Loch Ness Monster.
I don't know. Maybe some mysteries are just better left unsolved.
Yeah, that's gonna change further down the line. Scooby-Doo and the Loch Ness Monster is actually pretty solid. A few eye-rolling okay sure moments aside in the explanation of the mystery. The movie's decently paced, the animation's pretty good, if a little jarringly obvious when 3D effects are used against the 2D plane. The voice cast are all very good, and overall this is a much welcome upgrade from the weirdness of Monster of Mexico. It's not the most spectacular movie, but if you want to scratch your Scooby itch, you could do worse than this one. And so, it's time to sail off another of the 30-plus films of Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo?
Here come those meddling kids to join the chase. No creep can keep them away.